There's a fundamental truth about human nature that many people, especially women, often forget in the pursuit of connection. Not everything sacred should be shared. In a world that romanticizes vulnerability and oversharing, we've lost touch with the vital principle of personal sovereignty. The idea that some parts of your soul, your history, your inner life must remain yours and yours alone. Women in particular are taught that openness is a virtue, that transparency is a sign of love, and that to keep something to yourself is somehow dishonest. But this is a dangerous lie. There are dimensions of your life that should never be laid bare before a man, especially not prematurely, and certainly not indiscriminately. Not because you have something to hide, but because what is deeply personal is also deeply powerful. And when you give a man access to that power before he's earned the right to hold it with honor, your own knowledge, you risk giving him the tools to dominate, manipulate, or quietly resent you. The strongest women are not the ones who reveal everything. They are the ones who know what to withhold with wisdom. There's a reason the human psyche naturally conceals its most vulnerable aspects. It's not weakness. It's not deception. It's a form of protection rooted in evolutionary wisdom. For a woman, the tendency to share her inner world, her fears, her doubts, her past wounds, often comes from a place of seeking intimacy. She believes that through vulnerability, she creates trust. And while there is truth in the idea that connection can deepen when guarded walls fall, the problem arises when those walls are dismantled too soon. And before the foundation of trust is even laid, your deepest insecurities are not simple anecdotes or emotional trivia. They are the code to your internal framework. If handed over too easily, they cease to be yours and become potential weapons in the hands of someone who might not be prepared or willing to hold them with the gravity they deserve. Insecure thoughts, especially those that you barely understand yourself, are sacred invitations to introspection, not public declarations. Own knowledge, when a woman tells a man she doesn't feel beautiful without makeup, or that she fears abandonment, or that she's never felt good no matter how much she achieves. She's not just sharing a sentence. She's revealing the tectonic plates beneath her psychological surface. Those thoughts come from years of internalization, childhood scripts, past betrayals, and quiet moments of silent suffering. And the truth is, not every man is emotionally mature enough to hold that level of psychological complexity. In fact, many will recoil from it, minimize it, or worse, store it in the recesses of their memory only to use it against you when conflict arises. Why is this so important? Because what you reveal too quickly can shift the dynamic of a relationship. It can collapse polarity. In a masculine-feminine interaction, especially in the early stages, or own knowledge, psychological exposure must be gradual. You wouldn't hand a stranger the keys to your home, so why hand a man whom you're still learning keys to the corridors of your self-worth? This isn't about creating walls or playing games. It's about protecting the integrity of your narrative. Before a man knows what breaks you, he must first prove that he knows how to protect you. Before knowledge, before he learns where your cracks are, he must show you that he would never exploit them. Some women have internalized that if they don't open up fully and immediately, they are being closed off, guarded, or emotionally unavailable. But discernment is not distance. It's depth under control. You are not required to turn your soil inside out to be worthy of connection. In fact, your own knowledge, the woman who guards her insecurities and reveals them over time with trust and wisdom, earns far more respect than the woman who hands them like candy in the name of instant intimacy. Because when a man sees that you respect your own vulnerability, he will be far more likely to do the same. And if he doesn't, he was never capable of holding it in the first place. Insecurity is part of the human condition. We all carry wounds. But your wounds are not free for public viewing. They are sacred stories, scars etched into the emotional memory of your life. They deserve reverence, not casual conversation. And if a man hasn't earned the right to witness them, then silence is not cowardice, it's wisdom. Think carefully. Does he ask to know you so he can cherish you, Or so he can control you? Is he curious because he respects your mind, or because he seeks an advantage in the emotional hierarchy? These questions are not paranoid. They are prudent. In a world where oversharing is encouraged under the illusion of authenticity, a woman must become a fortress of discernment. That doesn't mean never sharing. It means knowing when, why, and with whom to share. It means resisting the cultural conditioning that says exposure equals strength. Because exposure without boundaries isn't strength. It's surrender. And a woman who surrenders her power too often finds herself being comforted by the same hands that will later cause her pain. Keep your insecurities close. Not in shame, but in sovereignty. Work through them in solitude, in therapy, with trusted female allies who understand the language of emotional nuance. Then, and only then, when a man has shown consistency, loyalty, and emotional intelligence, then you can peel back a layer. One layer. Slowly. See how he holds it. See if he holds you differently afterward. And even then watch. Because the man who deserves your soul must first prove he knows how to protect your silence. There's a common belief, especially among women, that honesty in relationships means full disclosure. That if a man is to love you authentically, he must know every detail of your past, including the heartbreaks, the betrayals, and the failures that left you broken. But what is often misunderstood is the psychological impact that such disclosure has on both the woman and the man. When you tell a man about your past romantic failures, especially early on, you risk compromising the very dynamic you're trying to build. Because what you're offering, often unconsciously, is a story that frames you as someone who has already been devalued by others. And the human mind, whether we like it or not, is influenced by precedent. When a man hears that others didn't choose you, that others left, cheated, manipulated, or abandoned you, he doesn't only feel compassion, he feels calculation. He now has a mental script for how others treated you, and subconsciously he may begin to treat you the same. This isn't about shame or secrecy. It's about psychological strategy. When a woman tells a man about her past relationships, how long they lasted, why they ended, how she was treated, she is inadvertently handing him a roadmap of her emotional pain points. And while some men will respond with empathy, many will respond with analysis. They'll look for patterns, weaknesses, entry points to power. She stayed with him after he cheated. That tells him how much betrayal you're willing to tolerate. She kept going back even though he was emotionally unavailable. That reveals your threshold for emotional starvation. You think you're being honest. He thinks he's gathering data. And once that dynamic is set, the purity of new connection is no longer present. The past is now sitting between you like a silent judge, altering how he sees you before he's even truly gotten to know you. Furthermore, revisiting romantic failures reopens wounds that should have been healed in solitude. The retelling of stories isn't always cathartic. It's often re-traumatizing. You say you've moved on, but in speaking about your ex in detail, you enter the emotional environment you claim to have left. And when a man sees that, even unintentionally, he sees someone who is still energetically tied to old narratives. He may never say it, but he will feel it. He will detect that your heart is still entangled with ghosts. And no man wants to compete with memory. There's also the matter of comparison. When you speak of exes, no matter how negatively, you create a mental benchmark. You may think you're showing what you won't tolerate again, but you're also painting a picture of your standards. Standards that, ironically, were compromised by your own choices. You were with him, after all. You gave him time, emotion, possibly even your body and future plans. That history, regardless of its painful outcome, was real. And that means you validated it, whether you admit it or not. So when a new man hears about that chapter, he doesn't just hear about what happened to you. He hears about what you allowed. And once he knows what you allowed, he instinctively starts calculating what he too might be able to get away with. We all have pasts. We all carry stories of heartbreak and disappointment, but those stories are not opening lines. They are sacred pages that should be shared, if ever, with tremendous discernment. The idea that love requires emotional nudity from the beginning is not only false, it's dangerous. True intimacy is built in layers, and trust is not assumed. It is earned over time. When you share your romantic history too soon, you shift the energy of the relationship from discovery to dissection. He is no longer getting to know you, he's getting to know the aftermath of someone else's chaos. Let silence be your strength. Let your present be your posture. If your past taught you something, let it show in how you move, in how you choose, in how you respond, not in how you explain. A man of depth doesn't need to hear about the failures to respect the woman who has risen above them. He can see it. He can sense it. And if he can't, then no amount of storytelling will convince him otherwise. When the time is right, and only when he's shown maturity, emotional safety, and deep investment. Then perhaps, in small doses, parts of your past can be shared. Not to gain sympathy, not to justify your standards, but to offer insight into the journey you've walked. Until then, protect your story, because your past does not need to be unpacked like a suitcase at the door of every man who walks into your life. Some things are earned, not handed over freely. Your history is one of them. There is a profound psychological reality about power and perception that many overlook in intimate relationships. Human beings, whether they admit it or not, assess each other based on strength. Emotional, physical, intellectual, and yes, financial. And while we like to believe that love transcends money, that relationships exist in some sacred space above material concerns, this is an illusion. Financial dynamics are deeply intertwined with respect, stability, and control. For a woman, revealing her financial weaknesses to a man, especially one who has not yet proven his trustworthiness, can completely shift the balance of power in ways that are often irreversible. It may seem innocent, even responsible, to disclose debts, poor spending habits, lack of savings, or reliance on family, but these admissions do not exist in a vacuum. They shape how a man views your capacity, your autonomy, and your leverage. When a woman openly shares that she's bad with money, struggling with debt, or unsure how to manage her financial future, she may be attempting to be honest, even vulnerable. But the man listening is now forming a psychological hierarchy. Whether consciously or unconsciously, he begins to place himself somewhere above her. He sees himself as the provider, the fixer, the authority. Or worse, the manipulator. He now has a foothold in a domain that is not about love, but about control. Even a man who genuinely likes you may begin to view you as someone who needs guidance rather than partnership. And once that dynamic is established, you may never truly regain the upper hand. Because financial weakness doesn't just change his perception of your stability, it changes his perception of your identity. It is critical to understand that the way a woman holds herself in regard to money says more about her internal structure than her bank account. A woman with modest means but clear financial boundaries and discipline commands far more respect than a woman with access to wealth but no control over it. Men don't just respond to what you have, they respond to how you handle what you have. So when you reveal carelessness, desperation, or dependency, you are not just inviting pity. You are potentially inviting possession. And a man who believes you can be possessed will eventually test the limits of how much you can be controlled. This isn't to suggest that a woman should never share her financial reality. Of course, in committed relationships where lives and futures intertwine, financial transparency becomes essential. But timing and context are everything. If you disclose too soon, you forfeit the mystery and independence that form the foundation of romantic respect. You go from being a woman who owns her world to being a woman whose world is falling apart. And that shift, even if subtle, changes the emotional temperature of the relationship. He's no longer courting a queen. He's rescuing a damsel. And once you've been cast in that role, it's difficult to return to your throne. There's also a risk of creating an imbalance that fosters resentment. On both sides, he may feel burdened by the knowledge of your struggle and silently resent the responsibility it implies. You, in turn, may begin to feel small, indebted, or guilty, especially if he starts to offer help or advice. And the moment money enters the equation in an unbalanced way, motives become murky. Is he helping out of care, or is he establishing leverage? Are you accepting out of trust or out of fear? These are not questions you want clouding a budding relationship. The most powerful position a woman can hold is one of quiet control. You don't need to lie about your financial situation, but you also don't need to lay it bare before the relationship has matured. Instead, let your habits speak. Let him see that you live within your means, that you make decisions with clarity, that you are building something. Even if slowly, this shows far more strength than listing off numbers and struggles in attempt to seem transparent. A woman who owns her silence in this area commands far more than the woman who spills every detail hoping for acceptance. Money is not just currency. It's a reflection of mindset, discipline, and sovereignty. And when you hand over your financial weaknesses too soon, you risk trading your sovereignty for sympathy. That is never a good bargain. So protect your financial story like you would protect your emotional one. Wait until he has shown that he's not just interested in your lifestyle, but invested in your life. Until then, move with discretion. Because the woman who understands the psychology of money understands the psychology of power. And in relationships, power, when unbalanced, becomes the seed of disconnection. Choose strength, choose silence, choose discernment. Every individual is born into a web of circumstances they did not choose. Culture, class, family, belief systems, dysfunctions, traumas. These elements silently sculpt the psyche and shape the internal map by which a person navigates the world. For women, the family system is often especially influential, as many are raised to be caretakers of emotional chaos, peacemakers amidst tension, or silent witnesses to generational dysfunction. And yet, there is a dangerous tendency to reveal these familial wounds too soon, especially to a man one is growing close to. Whether out of a desire to be honest, to feel understood, or simply to explain certain behaviors, many women prematurely unload the weight of their family dysfunction. Abuse, betrayal, parental neglect, toxic dynamics, mental illness, or cycles of generational failure. But in doing so, they often miscalculate the psychological cost of such disclosure. Because once a man sees where you come from, he begins to see you through that lens, whether he admits it or not. The mind is wired to draw conclusions. We are pattern-seeking creatures. And so, when you reveal that your father was absent, your mother manipulative, or your siblings hostile, a man doesn't just hear about them. He hears something about you. He begins to wonder how much of that dysfunction shaped your values, your reactions, your emotional balance. He may start to see you not as the person you are now, but as an extension of the chaos you escaped. And even if he's mature, and even if he listens with sympathy, he still begins constructing a mental image of who you must have been to survive that environment. That image will color his judgment in subtle but undeniable ways. More importantly, disclosing family dysfunction too early can place a woman in a psychological posture of self-justification. She starts to explain why she's guarded or too open or cautious or intense. She positions her story as the reason for her complexity. But this becomes dangerous when the man begins to conflate the woman's worth with the wounds she carries. He starts to see her not as a sovereign being, but as someone who is still haunted by a past she hasn't fully risen above. This shift undermines respect. It turns a dynamic of partnership into one of evaluation and analysis. And the man who feels he has figured you out prematurely is no longer discovering you, he's diagnosing you. What's equally concerning is that some men, particularly those with controlling tendencies, will use your family's dysfunction as an unspoken excuse to dominate. They'll think, she comes from disorder, she needs me to bring order. It becomes a silent justification for power imbalances. And before long, you may find yourself repeating a dynamic where someone else's will overshadows your own. This is especially dangerous because it happens under the guise of care. You might believe he's being protective, responsible, or strong, when in fact, he's merely filling a psychological vacuum created by your premature vulnerability. Family pain is not shameful, but it is sacred, It must be guarded with discretion, not because it's a secret, but because it's a treasure. A woman who speaks casually about her family's deepest flaws communicates that those wounds are still loose within her, unintegrated, unresolved. A woman who holds that story close and only offers it in pieces once trust is established commands greater respect, because she's not looking for a savior. She's not inviting rescue. She's inviting understanding on her own terms. You owe no man an explanation for your past until he's proven he can walk beside you in the present with strength and humility. Let your choices, your character, and your discipline speak louder than your history. If he earns your trust over time through consistency, then he may learn about the path you've walked. But he must prove first that he won't use that path to walk over you. Family dysfunction is a crucible. It forges resilience, perspective, and often great emotional depth. But it also leaves behind shadows. Shadows that can be misunderstood, misjudged, or manipulated if revealed too soon. So guard your story. Let a man fall in love with your presence before he ever learns about your past. Let him respect your composure before he hears about your chaos. Let him see your strength before he hears about your scars. Because what you reveal too quickly becomes common in his mind. And what is common loses its power. You are not your family's dysfunction. You are who you became in spite of it. Let that be the story he sees first. There is a fundamental truth in human nature that is difficult to accept, but impossible to deny. People respond to what you believe about yourself. Your internal dialogue, the voice that narrates your self-worth, your fears, your strengths, inevitably leaks into how others experience you. And for women, this becomes particularly consequential in romantic dynamics. When a woman openly shares her deepest insecurities with a man too early, whether it's about her body, her intelligence, her worthiness, her desirability, or her fear of being abandoned. She isn't just being vulnerable. She is offering a blueprint of her own self-doubt. And the moment that blueprint is placed in his hands, the power dynamic shifts in ways that are subtle, yet profound. Because once a man knows what you secretly believe is wrong with you, he has the power, whether intentional or not, to confirm it. This isn't to suggest that vulnerability is weakness. Vulnerability, when held with strength and discernment, is the foundation of intimacy. But timing, context, and emotional maturity matter. When you tell a man that you feel inadequate, unattractive, unworthy, or not enough, especially in the early stages of a relationship, you are not creating closeness, you are handing over emotional ammunition. Even a good man, one who genuinely cares, may begin to see you through the lens of your self-doubt. He might treat you more delicately, less respectfully, more condescendingly. And worse, a man who is manipulative or narcissistic will store those confessions away like tools in a drawer, ready to be used when he wants to cut you down or keep you under his control. Women often underestimate how powerful their words are, especially when those words come from a place of emotional honesty. When you say, "I've never felt beautiful," or "I always feel like I'm not enough," what you mean as a moment of connection may instead register as a revelation of weakness. And in relationships, weakness that is not healed is often exploited, not always maliciously, but inevitably. Because once something is spoken, it cannot be unheard. The image of you struggling with yourself will live in his mind and color his perception of you. And even if he does not say it aloud, he may begin to see you as fragile or as someone who needs constant reassurance, validation, or saving. What makes this even more complex is the reality that most women carry insecurities that were not born within them but implanted from parents, peers, past lovers, media. These doubts are often not facts but stories, repeated so often they feel like truths. But when you give those stories to a man without context, without strength, without having first transformed them within yourself, you risk letting him become the editor of a narrative that is not his to rewrite. And once you've allowed someone else to define how you see yourself, you've surrendered the most sacred form of power, self-definition. There is wisdom in restraint. Not silence that stems from fear, but silence that stems from sovereignty. A woman who knows her insecurities, but does not let them dominate her presence, walks with a different energy. She does not lie about who she is, but she also does not hand over the keys to her inner world to anyone who has not proven they can handle them with care. She lets her confidence speak first. She lets her competence shine. She moves with the authority of someone who has faced her demons, but refuses to put them on display as conversation pieces. She understands that true strength is not in exposing every wound, but in choosing when and to whom that exposure is given. Eventually, when a man has shown through action, patience and presence that he is safe, that he can hold space without exploiting it, then and only then can deeper insecurities be shared in the right frame, not as confessions of shame, but as testimonies of growth. That is the only time they serve connection instead of sabotage. Until that point, your inner world is sacred ground. Guard it not with fear, but with discernment. Because what you reveal too quickly can be used against you too easily. And once a man believes you are unsure of your own worth, you will forever be trying to convince him otherwise. But when you carry yourself as someone who knows her value, even if you're still growing into it, he has no choice but to meet you on the level you've already claimed. That is the real power. And that is the silence that speaks loudest.